știm noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Dulci cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce înseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. самых окраин, южный гор до северных морей. Человек проходит, как хозяин необъятной родины своей. Тут жизнь невольна и широка, точно Волга полная течет. Молодым везде у нас дорога, старикам везде у нас почет. Никто у нас не лишний, по заслугам каждый награжден. Золотыми буквами мы пишем всенародный сталинский закон. Этих слов величие и славу никакие годы не сотрут. Человек всегда имеет право на учение, подвиг и на труд. Весенний ветер веет, каждым днем все радостнее жить. И никто на свете не умеет лучше нас смеяться и любить. Но сурово брови мы насупим, если враг захочет нас сломать. Как небесную родину мы любим, бережем, как ласковую мать. костяк, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути. И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening of the 2nd of February 2026, and here we are with the live stream for this evening. And I'll say thank you to all those of you who have tuned in thus far. We are currently live on Twitch and on X and on Rumble and on YouTube. So be sure to like and share if you haven't done so already. So we are here today with the latest from the Trump's increasingly impotent flailing at Iran. We're going to be looking at the latest from the front lines and the negotiating table in and around Ukraine, and take in a couple of other things as well, along with any comments or questions that you might have in the chat. So thanks to all of those of you who contributed to the chat thus far. Right, so we're going to get to the Iran story in just a moment. But I would be remiss as a long-time dweller in perfidious Albion if I didn't remark upon the political passing of a certain Peter Mandelson. Now, if you're not familiar with who Peter Mandelson is, he is one of the big names in British terms from the Epstein files, and he has been the subject of a lot of reporting on the various emails that have been released by the Department of Justice featuring correspondence between Mandelson and Epstein going all the way back almost 20 years now, when Mandelson was a cabinet minister for the third time, a cabinet minister. Now, Mandelson is, without being prime minister, in fact, without actually occupying any of what in British terms is referred to as the great offices of state. Mandelson is one of the most important figures in bourgeois politics in old perfidious Albion over the last 40 to 50 years. He was one of the architects of what is referred to as New Labour, which I'll come to exactly what that means in just a moment. He was the key political ally of Tony Blair. He was responsible for a lot of the rebranding and PR job done on the Labour Party in the late 80s and early 90s. He was also one of the key movers behind Neil Kinnock, another wretched, contemptible slimeball, currently dwelling on the red benches of the House of Lords, one of the vermin in ermine. Now, Mandelson became a cabinet minister all the way back in 1997. He was trade minister for a while, had to resign a few months into the job because he'd taken an undeclared loan from a guy called Geoffrey Robinson. Geoffrey Robinson was the postmaster general guy, minister in charge of the post office in Blair's first cabinet. Mandelson had taken a £350,000 loan from him to get a mortgage. Now, one of the things you learn about Mandelson is that he was always in love with money, like the acquiring of as much money and as many riches as he could possibly get hold of. He loved being around rich people, and he loved acting as if he was one of them. That's the thing to understand about him. That's what motivates him more than anything else. More than anything else. Now, Mandelson took a loan from this guy, Geoffrey Robinson, all the way back in the 90s. And because he didn't declare it, and he was in charge of the Department of Trade and Industry, which had influence over areas of business that Robinson was invested in, now he was found to be in breach of various different rules and had to resign. Now, Robinson, the guy he took the loan from, interestingly enough, way back in the 80s, was a business associate of guess who? Robert Maxwell. Now, of course, Robert Maxwell, father of Ghislaine Maxwell, madam to Epstein's horrific sex ring. So all the connections mount up. But because he was such a favorite of Blair, Mandelson's departure from the highest levels of politics only lasted around about a year. He was brought back in as Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Again, he had to resign from that post I think it was about a year and a half in to that post. He had to resign because he was found to have been intervening to speed up the passport applications of some Indian billionaires, the Hinduja brothers. I believe that they were steel magnates. That was how they were making their money. And they wanted British passports for, same reason every slime bag wants a British passport. And Mandelson was associated with them and the story was at the time that he had a financial connection with them. And he was trying to basically lean on the passport office to speed up their passport application. And he had to resign again. He was then packed off to be Trade Commissioner of the European Union. And the European Union, a horrifically corrupt organization that pays people like Peter Mandelson, failed politicians from their home countries, gigantic amounts of money for engaging in gigantic amounts of corruption. During this time, he made such notable friends as Oleg Deripaska, the disgraceful oligarch scumbag who made his money in the Yeltsin era. I believe he was actually on Deripaska's yacht chatting idly with, of course, George Osborne, who was to become David Cameron's Chancellor of the Exchequer. He was brought back into government by Gordon Brown, the buffoonish idiot who was Britain's finance minister for a decade, and managed to oversee such terrifically inspiring and very competent policies, such as relaxing the policies on loans and mortgages, getting British workers more up to their necks in credit card debt, selling off the British gold reserves, and of course, ending, or should we say, appearing to end any semblance of democratic control over the Bank of England, making it very similar to the way in which the Federal Reserve operates. See, previously, the Chancellor of the Exchequer was ordered the governor of the Bank of England in terms of the interest rate rises, or whether to raise or cut interest rates. Now, Brown oversaw a policy where that was declared to be over, and now it was going to be a bureaucratic committee that oversaw the interest rate rises. So removing any democratic pressure on the Bank of England whatsoever. These were all Gordon Brown's ideas, and it led to the absolute, or was part of what led to the absolute disaster of the crash of 2008 to 2010. During that time, they brought Mandelson back to again serve as a minister for trade and industry, this time in the House of Lords. And it's this period where you get the bulk of the correspondence between Epstein and Mandelson that's been released in the files. And what it relates to is Mandelson constantly messaging Epstein with every twist and turn in the British government's response to the banking crash. So the attempt to restrict banker bonuses was Mandelson emailed Jamie Dimon and Epstein, or contacted Dimon through Epstein, it appears, and said, well, you should threaten the current British finance minister if the banker bonuses policy isn't dropped. Now, don't get me wrong, that banker bonuses policy was a waste of time. It would have made no difference to anything whatsoever. But the fact is that Mandelson is telling the chief executives of the major banks in the United States to threaten his own cabinet colleagues to get them to drop a policy which he supposedly he is committed to supporting. And there's a huge, voluminous amounts of correspondence between Mandelson and Epstein, where Mandelson is reporting on every single thing that the government is doing. And Epstein is, of course, using this information to make his own bets on what the British government will do and profit from it. So Mandelson was even giving away state secrets when he gave Epstein the heads up on that the British government was going to fall after the 2010 election, delivered a hung parliament. And so Mandelson gave away a ton of secret information to, depending upon whose story you believe, a guy who was just a private individual, a US citizen, or if you have a brain, you'll see that Mandelson was informing on British government policy discussions and decisions to an agent of the Mossad, which is what Mandelson was doing. Now, quite how he's going to explain that one is going to be an interesting question. We'll see how he explains that away. But the point about Mandelson is he's clearly outlived his usefulness for the British ruling class. They've decided, well, it was a good run, Peter, but we need to throw somebody under the bus, so it might as well be you. It's also the fact that this is being released by the Trump's DOJ they will probably be looking to deliver some high-profile scalps that are outside of their own cabinet and outside of the United States. But Mandelson has long ago expended his usage to the British ruling class, so now he is being hung out to dry, basically. So he has resigned from the Labour Party. It looks like he's going to get drummed out of the House of Lords, which must be really annoying for Mandelson because, if we're talking about corrupt perverts, that's basically the retirement home for them. Now, the point about Mandelson, though, isn't that he's extraordinarily corrupt. He's very corrupt, but he's not an extraordinary figure in that sense. He's as the fairly standard Labour Party politician of the last 50 odd years, in that he comes from the sort of grasping petty bourgeoisie. He desperately wants cash. He desperately wants to accumulate enough money to live like his buddies like Richard Branson and Jeffrey Epstein did. So the thing for Mandelson is always cash, which is the thing that would have attracted him, I think, to Epstein. Because Epstein was a means by which he could meet more rich people and make more lucrative connections and make more money. That's probably what he was after. There's no indication as yet that Epstein was providing, other things, the stuff that Epstein is more famous for doing. But Mandelson is typical of these Labour Party politicians, which is that they desire money above everything else, that they use their office basically just to make connections with rich people and sell their political services to them, and that they have an absolute bone deep contempt for the working class in this country. Of course they do, who they basically told to basically turn around to them and said, well, you might not like us, but you've got nowhere else to go. Well, now the Labour Party that Mandelson did so much to create, hovers on the edge of extinction. Now that might seem rather odd, given that the Labour Party is still in government. It's got a massive majority. But there is a by-election coming up in my old city, Manchester, in a constituency called Gorton. And the Labour Party stitched up the nomination process to give the candidacy to a sort of typical Mandelsonian candidate who because she's a former corporate raider and asset stripper standing for the Labour Party. Perfect. And Mandelson's scandal, which, given that he's resigned from the Labour Party and now will most likely be drummed out of the House of Lords, we can only assume that there's going to be even more damaging revelations about him coming out very soon, which is why he's jumped before he was pushed on with regards to the Labour Party. So this scandal is going to stick to Starmer, of course, because Starmer is basically Mandelson's creation. Mandelson acted as mentor to Starmer. He acted as mentor to Starmer's chief of staff, this fucking corrupt little ginger shithead called Morgan McSweeney, who's actually Irish by birth. But incidentally, McSweeney is the offspring of a family of Irish landlords who made a mint renting out cheap, shitty hotels to the Irish government so they could stash refugees in them. So comes from a totally corrupt family, total rancid piece of shit family, and he's a total rancid piece of shit guy. He's a ultra right-wing reactionary who basically was brought in and mentored by Mandelson in order to restore a sort of new Labour Mark II in the Labour Party. And Starmer is Mandelson's creation. So the interesting thing is, the interesting question to ask is, how much of this sticks to Starmer himself? Well, it can't not stick to Starmer. Again, everybody who knows anything about the Labour Party knows that Mandelson sponsored Starmer's career as Labour Party frontbencher and Labour Party leader. He is tied to Mandelson. He made Mandelson his US ambassador, even knowing, and this was even when Mandelson's association with Epstein was well known, but Starmer did it anyway because he was paying off his mentor. Now the decision's been made somewhere in the shadowy corridors of power in London that the Epstein scandal is getting too hot. We better sacrifice somebody. Better be Mandelson. So now his old protege Starmer will not be able to bury him with enough dirt. But it's going to cost the Labour Party. They're going to lose this by-election in Gorton. Could be to Reform, could be to the almost as reactionary and wretched Green Party. Doesn't really matter. But Labour's going to lose it and lose it badly. And the Starmer's association with Mandelson is going to be part of it, along with Starmer's huge unpopularity. So the Mandelson scandal will continue. But it's important to just conclude on this point. Mandelson might be an important figure in terms of his connections with the British state, with the British intelligence services, with various different, very rich individuals. But he's by no means extraordinary. He is typical of the Labour Party. Every Labour MP is basically in the Peter Mandelson mode these days, which is a greedy, grasping, petty bourgeois swine who would sell their own mother for cash. This is who the Labour Party is. That, and of course, a deeply vicious imperialist reactionary. One of the last things that Mandelson did was put his name to an editorial in the Times of London praising Trump's abduction on entirely false grounds of President Maduro. So this is who Peter Mandelson is. He's an absolute piece of garbage. He is a pile of human feces. He is a rat in somewhat human form. He is a man who would happily condemn millions into slavery and misery so he could have another ivory back scratcher. There is no insult too caustic for him. There is no punishment that should be too severe for a man like that. He is a foul reactionary. One can only hope that he sinks into further disgrace, and the ideal punishment for a guy like that would probably be to spend the rest of his life in prison for all the crimes that he's committed, and also probably quite a lot of other things that he's done which haven't even come to light yet. So good riddance to Peter Mandelson, but don't think that that's he's particularly extraordinary. He personifies the Labour Party. A corrupt, vicious, squalid, petty, repulsive reactionary. That's what the Labour Party is, and he embodies it perfectly. So we move on to talk about the next item on our agenda for tonight, which is, of course, what is the latest from the Trump regime's attempt to, well, do something with regard to Iran. Now, on the last show a couple of days ago, I said that it was more than likely that Trump was essentially stuck in a hole, which is that the regime change operation that the US wanted to run against the Islamic Republic had failed already. It failed when the terrorist campaign unleashed by the US in Iran was defeated. That it failed when that didn't lead to a Libya or Syria type scenario thus far, and it deprived the US imperialists of an army on the ground that they could make use of. Yeah, because as to reiterate what we were saying the other night, the only way the US could actually win in Iran was if they have a force on the ground which doesn't depend upon their own men, meaning either some kind of large-scale terroristic insurgency, or there are significant defections from the Iranian state forces to the US side. None of that has worked. None of that has happened. So the next question is, well, what do they do now? If they don't have people on the ground available to them, if the Iranians have defeated that, what do they want? Well, apparently Trump has said he wants a fast, decisive strike against Iran, meaning that essentially Trump's, I would say, just looking for a plausible way to back down, because this maneuvering of this carrier strike group into position was meant to be the final finishing touch of a regime change operation. That now that has fallen flat, Trump's got nowhere to go. So now the Trump administration is apparently looking for some kind of way out. Now, the way out that I think Trump and those around him would favor would be some symbolic but high-profile airstrike on some target in Iran that would look spectacular. So Trump could claim the repressive apparatus of the regime has been totally destroyed by me, no one else, me. Now, the issue seems to be, as I stated the other night, that Trump may want that. At the moment, the Iranians aren't going to give it to him because the Iranians seem to have made an entirely correct decision, which is, why the hell should we let you continually target us in, whenever you want, violating our sovereignty and independence? Why should we let you bomb our country? So what? Trump can get himself out of a hole that he dug for himself? Of course, the Iranians aren't in any mood to do that. So it leads us to, like, well, if the Iranians won't do that, what the hell does Trump do? He might just try and bomb somewhere in Iran anyway and scuttle off and declare victory, perhaps. But what if the Iranians shoot back? See, there is apparently a lot of haggling going on at the moment between the Iranians and then representatives of the foreign ministries of Egypt, Saudi, Oman, and Qatar, and possibly the UAE over a potential solution. Now, Trump has demanded, well, the Trump administration has demanded all kinds of concessions from Iran, which Iran's not going to make. They've demanded, like, well, we're going to demand that you give up all of your long-range ballistic missiles. Not going to happen. We demand that you give up nuclear enrichment. Not going to happen. Again, like, Trump's blown all of the possibilities of negotiations. And why would the Iranian leadership trust him anyway, given that they were talking about negotiations last time when the Israelis sprung their trap in the 12-day war? So there is a report that there has been an offer made to hand over 400 kilograms of enriched uranium from the Iranian leadership to the Trump administration, and that this will constitute some kind of bargaining chip. But that is one report. We don't have confirmation that offer has either been made, let alone accepted as of yet. And the Iranian armed forces are still talking about actually having a decisive response to any American military action. So we are essentially circling now. I believe that I was right to say the other night that the Americans can't wage a war of regime change on Iran and expect to win. They are essentially stuck without forces on the ground, without the ability to secure defections from the Iranian state forces to their own side. Without any of that happening, the Americans can't do anything. And everybody can see that they can't do anything either, because they are unwilling and to be honest, unable to mobilize the amount of resources that would be needed to carry out the kind of sustained airstrikes on Iran that they would argue would lead to regime change. I don't think sustained airstrikes on Iran would lead to regime change. In actual fact, it would probably lead to a consolidation of the population behind the current leadership. So this is the problem that the Americans now face, is that they have now again painted themselves into a corner. They can't realistically expect to run a regime change operation via a bombing campaign, but they won't want to be seen to back down either. So they're now looking for an acceptable way out, basically. So there will be apparently a meeting between the relevant parties in Istanbul this Friday coming up. So we'll keep an eye on that. But the Iranian leadership appears quite justifiably rather confident. They seem to think that they have the ability to deliver damage to the US naval assets. The Iranians are doing naval drills around the Straits of Hormuz. They are clearly not intimidated by the presence of the US carrier strike group. So we've even had an Iranian general coming out recently and saying that the Iranian military posture will go from defensive to offensive as required. Because, well, why wouldn't they, given the fact that even if the Americans back off this time around, they'll be back for more. Even if Iran gets some sort of deal with the United States will not give up the quest for regime change in Iran. How could they? This is an objective requirement brought about by the crisis of the US system. So we'll keep an eye on that. But what it tells us is that the Iranian society and state forces remaining unified means that essentially the Americans have nowhere to go, not without taking risks to themselves that they are not willing to take at the moment. So, in passing, it's worth mentioning also that the Israeli regime continues to carry out acts of aggression, not just in Gaza, but also in Lebanon, where apparently they dumped some version of an updated Agent Orange on southern Lebanon today. So we'll have to keep an eye on that developing story. But it's worth emphasizing that the Israeli regime continually attacks southern Lebanon and has continued to do so even after the ceasefire with Hezbollah, just as they continue to attack Gaza even after the supposed ceasefire with Hamas. So whenever you hear some scumbag moaning about the violence of Hezbollah or the violence of Hamas, it's worth having this in your mind that not only do the Israelis continually attack southern Lebanon and Gaza, but they do so with chemical weapons as well. So we've already covered the Epstein files to some extent, but there is also, along with Mandelson, there is also a connection to Ukraine, which is that Epstein is reportedly linked to at least one Ukrainian modeling agency. And even the Kiev Independent, which is a Western-funded newspaper in Ukraine, admitted over a decade ago that Ukraine was one of the global sex trafficking capitals. We talked about this the other night. And so it's no wonder that Epstein would be very interested in it. But it's also worth noting that one of the maneuvers that the British and the American bourgeois press are trying to carry off is tying Epstein to Russia. Oh, well, it was all it was all a honeypot run on behalf of the Russians. This is literally what the British press is now saying. Of course, there is a link between Putin and Epstein. It's that Epstein was sponsoring color revolution attempts against Putin back in 2012. If you remember, there was meant to be like a Moscow spring as Putin was coming back into the presidency, and all the Russian liberals, wet their pants and all ran out into the street and protested. Well, there was meant to be a regime change attempt done then, and Epstein was linked to one of the characters involved in that. So this is a little remarked upon feature of the Epstein files, is that they are, even though the British and the US press are trying to blame the whole thing on the Russians, in actual fact, the only link between Putin and Epstein was that Epstein was working for the overthrow of Putin. And why wouldn't he? Because whatever else you can say about the Putin-led system, and there's lots of critiques to be had, and indeed I've talked about them, the reason why the West hates Putin so much is because, well, he slowly brought the Yeltsin years to an end, and the West's ability to exploit and quite literally rape Russia has been largely brought to an end. Like, if you remember the 1990s and the amount of Russian women who were like sold into sex slavery, it's this similar to what's happened with Ukrainian women over the past decade and a half. Epstein would be very interested in reducing Russia back to what it was in the 90s again. But that's the only link. The big bugbear but held by the Epsteins of this world against Putin is that he's made the possibilities of hyper exploiting and sexually exploiting Russian women and children to be less, because the situation in Russia now is a lot more stable and the economy has actually grown. So the free for all of the Yeltsin era has been brought to a close. And that, of course, is something which is of great regret to the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world. Now, moving theatres, shall we say, it's worth just noting that the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, has claimed that Macron has authorized the French intelligence services to eliminate undesirable leaders in Africa. And we all know who that means. That means the trio from the Alliance of Sahel states, Traore, Goita, and Chiani, who are the ones who are pioneering the removal of French influence from their particular countries. And so that the French would be engaged in a terrorist plot to try and kill these leaders should be no surprise whatsoever. They have done it before. They're the ones who were behind the assassination attempt on, a successful, unfortunately, assassination attempt on Thomas Sankara, after all. So the groaning contradictions opened up by the Russian special military operation continue, and the situation in Africa is one of those. But to turn then to the situation in Ukraine itself, because the various different peace talk forums have been ongoing between Russia, the United States, and Ukraine, with the Ukrainians again declaring that they won't make any concessions whatsoever and want guarantees of their security to be given to them by the United States. Now, the problem here is that for Zelensky, at least, that Trump's not going to want to give those guarantees. And to be honest, if I was Zelensky, I wouldn't believe any guarantee that Trump gave me, just as I wouldn't have believed that any guarantee that Biden gave me either. And it's not just because both men have their brains leaking out of their ears. It's because the US will not take chances with regard to a head-on confrontation with the Russians for the purposes of defending the Zelensky regime. Biden wouldn't do that. Trump won't do that either. So the next question is, well, what happens? Where are the negotiations going? And the negotiations seem to be continually going nowhere. Every time there is an announcement that some concession has been made, it's immediately counterbalanced with fresh attacks, usually in the geographical area where concessions were talked of. So this is, again, an increasingly large problem for the Trump regime, given their big promises about ending the war, and yet now they can't do shit, basically. So the prediction that I made before Christmas, in actual fact, which is that, and again, this isn't particularly controversial, which is that the war will continue, and the negotiations will inevitably fail, because again, the Trump gang aren't looking for actual negotiations. They're looking for the Russians to just capitulate, and that's the only negotiation that they will accept fundamentally. So a brief run through of some stories there. I'm going to just dart over onto the chat. So we have 262 of you watching live on YouTube. That's excellent. 6 on Marx, Engels, and Stalin Mao channel on Rumble, and 1 of you on the Twitch channel. And how many have we got here on on X? That's 243 of you on X. All excellent stuff. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Just going to take in a few comments here from the floor, so to speak. Right, where are we? All right, got it. So hello to Sid Hatfield, hello to J.E. Lenin99, hello to Fallen Crow, hello to Ogas Cybernetics, hello to Davy in the wild westland of Wales, hello to Zama, hello to David Ball, and hello to Wicked Witch of the Southeast. Sid says, so many multipolarists and some of our comrades seem excessively worried about Cuba, but the Movimiento 26 de Julio has persevered thus far. I seriously doubt it will be felled now. Well, there's always a possibility. But again, like the Cuba thing demonstrates the same problem for the Americans that like the Iran situation does, which is that unless they can gain local recruits to try and overthrow the Cuban state, it's always terrifically difficult for them to do so. They've been trying to overthrow the Cuban state now for over 60 years, and it hasn't worked. Now, of course, there is always the possibility of the Americans rolling the dice and trying some sort of invasion, but I very much doubt that. I very much doubt that they will do that. Too risky, after all. Cubans might shoot back. And so the American aim will be to try and, again, trigger a color revolution via increased economic pressure. Now, quite how the important allies of Cuba respond to this, which is, of course, the Russians and the Chinese, will be an interesting question to observe. Will they take some kind of chance? Will they give the kind of security guarantee to Cuba that the Soviet Union used to, which might actually put off the US for everything except their sort of under-the-counter stuff? At the moment, we don't know, but the Trump administration released like a series of complete bullshit lies the other day about how Cuba was an unprecedented threat to the United States, which again is completely ridiculous. But the people actually reading this and imbibing the slop might believe it. So yes, but I doubt that Cuba will fall, to be completely honest. I think it has more allies than it ever has had, and this will of course lead to an increasing amount, or should we say more security than would have been available otherwise. Right. Okay, what we got here? Hello to Mushkin. Hello to Sophia. Hello to Ogas Cybernetics. Hello to Potted Rodent. Hello to Abtin. Hello to Nush82, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Hello to Peep Show 090 in Hertfordshire. Yeah, to answer to your point, the thing that the US fears about Cuba is the fact that it provides an alternative model. Now, of course, that alternative model was born out of a revolutionary war and was born out of a revolutionary hero in the form of Castro. So, the question of a good example. I mean, you hear constantly from the US imperialists about why Cuba's terrible, Cuba's falling apart, it's all awful, etc. And of course, there are difficulties there related to the embargo. But Cuba still has outstanding successes, particularly in the field of like medical technology and medical practice, that you can only be dreamed of by the United States. Now, Kiwi Corner says something interesting here on Rumble. It says a prolonged war is great for the military-industrial complex. Not good for the political system, though, and also there's a very big question over whether it is good for the military-industrial complex. Because if you have a prolonged war, the United States gets in a prolonged war with Iran, say, then Iran's going to shoot back, and they're going to lose a lot of military equipment. And the military-industrial complex of the United States will be revealed to be unable to actually keep up with the equipment demands to resupply an armed force. So in actual fact, the military-industrial complex will have a lot of money pumped into it, will juice its share price and do a payout to its stockholders, but will be revealed to be utterly useless in a war. So that's something which is not taken into consideration, because we're assuming when we say that a prolonged war will be good for the military-industrial complex, the military-industrial complex is actually capable of producing stuff. As thus far, all of the attempts to upscale shell production inside the United States have all failed. They can't keep pace with the amount of shells that the Russians can produce. So it's an interesting one. But I would doubt whether a prolonged war would be as good for the military-industrial complex as the current business model, which is being paid gigantic amounts of money to produce things that don't work and getting paid no matter what you do. There's a big war, you actually need to produce something, and the system's not very good at mass production. Jim Hignett says, do we know what was going on with the 5 Ukrainian boys who tried to blow up Starmer's old stuff? Don't know. Have my suspicions, but don't know anything solid. We'll know more as the trial of the 5 Ukrainian male models proceeds. I mean, it's either one. I mean, in my view, it's either one of two things. Either Starmer did have a, shall we say, encounter with these gentlemen at some stage. Maybe he didn't pay them. Who knows? Or this is the British security services basically doing a number on Starmer, who is no longer of any use to them. Maybe. But at the moment, I don't know. Going to have to look more into it. So, Venezuela under Delcy Rodriguez, says Nush 82, seems to have slowly capitulated like a controlled demolition. Well, they appear to have made concessions, though it would. I'm told that the concessions over the oil ownership and allowing Americans in, this might not be as meaningful as it seems. For a start, that bill was written under Maduro, so Maduro already said that there was never any opposition from the Venezuelans to actually selling oil to the United States. It was the United States itself which barred its own companies from actually buying Venezuelan oil. Now, the American oil companies, though, in terms of what Trump might get out of this, have basically told Trump that they're not going to invest until like the PSUV is chased out of power and democracy has been restored. Now, when a corporate executive tells you that he wants to see democracy restored, what he means is he wants to see their property rights restored. That's what they want, and they want the PSUV out of power. Now, whether any of these things are attainable or not is another question entirely. I would suspect no at the moment, but again, needs to be monitored. Right. Good evening to Jawad. Good evening to Terry. Good evening to L Pool Photographs, Eman, Podama, Iris, Crocus. Hello to Edward and the Once and Future Latvian SSR. Hello to Abtin. Hello to Paul. Hello to Albert. Hello to Pavel from Reactionary Austria. Is there any other kind? Who else have we got here? Hello to Nikki. Hello to Alistair Page McGill, Wicked Witch of the Southeast, Daniel Vera, who comes to us from Mexico. Good to have you with us, comrade. And Albert asks, am I learning the drums? No, the drum set belongs to my fiance. So she's the one with the drums, not me. Just in the corner of the office where the camera's pointing, basically. Walter Keating says, Galloway had to be thrown out. Corbyn was shown the door. Mandelson quit when he was down, good and ready. That tells you everything about Labour. Yeah. They wouldn't have thrown him out. It would have taken something even bigger than just corruption and the leaking of state secrets for them to throw Mandelson out, given that he is the father of this particular Labour Party leadership and many others as well. Neil Kinnock is the Welsh windbag. Very true. Apparently, Professor Morandi said he thinks that a lot of this dirty laundry is being aired because there must be someone on the inside that wants to expose the insidious nature of these serpents. Well, maybe. Well, maybe. I mean, there's certainly a shitstorm has been caused, more so than I would have thought that they would have wanted, which is interesting, to say the least. Mohammed says, it's been speculated that Mandelson was an MI5 plant in the Labour Party in the 80s. The Labour Party was dominated by the left. I don't agree with that point, because the left and the Labour Party never dominated. And even when it did, it fucked it up. So the most dominant it got was the Michael Foot leadership, and Michael Foot was endlessly making concessions to the Labour Party right and the ruling class. And Michael Foot was incidentally a rabid supporter of the Falklands War as well. And they never got left never got full control of the Labour Party, even in the Michael Foot era. And after that, I mean, Kinnock relentlessly moved things back to the right, and that we got the awful New Labour years as a result. But as to whether Mandelson was an MI5 agent, I don't know. Now, it's certainly true that MI5 would look to plant people in any left-wing organisation with a significant working class base, as the Labour Party did at one stage. Was Mandelson MI5? Well, we won't know for a little while yet. It's worth remembering, though, that Mandelson wasn't always in the Labour Party. He was at a certain point in his life a member of the Young Communist League, the YCL. So that's an interesting combination, isn't it just? Right. Abolish Nature says, went on a date with an Iranian anarchist girl last Friday who believed that the 30,000 number in terms of murdered protesters. Well, I mean, anybody who believes those numbers from the US side clearly has no idea what they're talking about and is believing something that they want to believe, due to the fact they get some sort of vicarious thrill out of it, essentially. Yeah, but I was done a May Day march once, just marching in front of a banner of Stalin, and some twat in a pair of corduroy pants came staggering out of the building and shouted, 80 million dead, and he was entirely sincere about it. He thought he'd been told by someone that Stalin killed 80 million people. I think that's one of Solzhenitsyn's charming little numbers. But of course, it wasn't true. But people cling to it because this is the nature of political education these days, which is it's a bunch of anti-communist tripe. So MRL2YM says, question, what would you say to the claim that DPRK is closer to fascism than communism due to their embrace of nationalism? I'd say that is a point of view which reveals that whoever says it has tripe for brains. Now, the nationalism and communism aren't mutually exclusive. Like the DPRK waged a war of national liberation against the Japanese, and then against the Americans under the leadership of Kim Il-sung. Like Korean nationalism is a progressive nationalism because it is based upon, first of all, it's based upon the fact that the proletariat and peasantry in People's Korea were the liberating forces, and that the working class becomes the ruling class. So therefore, you can have a patriotism in a workers' state. You can have nationalism in a workers' state, and it doesn't make it fascist, because to be fascist, it would have to be a capitalist country with a ruling class that turns to fascism to reassert their control over any particular country. Whereas DPRK is a workers' state run by a system of the dictatorship of the proletariat. That isn't fascism by its very nature. That is a radically different system based upon the triumph of human solidarity. whereas fascism is the violent reassertion of the power, quote unquote, power of the reactionary imperialist ruling class. So you can embrace no form of nationalism, proletarian patriotism, as long as it's based on the love for the country as a proletarian nation and love for the country for what it could be, not loyalty to the schemes of the ruling class. So that's the difference that I would emphasize there. And DPRK, yes, DPRK is very emphasizes Korean nationalism very heavily, but again, that's Korean nationalism as filtered through the dictatorship of the proletariat and the workings and writings of Kim Il-sung. So it's a fundamentally different concept of nationalism there. Jonathan C. said Hitler and Mussolini were handed power by the elite. That's very true. Lone Bart says Trump has hanged himself with his own arrogance. Well, Trump loudly defecated in his own pants the other day, apparently. I saw a video this morning on Twitter of like Trump talking, and then there's a sudden fart noise, and all the media is ushered out of the room as soon as that happens. So that's an interesting development there, to say the least. Okay. Okay. Hello to Ash, and hello to Jenny, and hello to Harold, and Michael McGoldrick, and yeah, and Johan Krober 392. Hello to you. Walter Keating says, when you call another man Lord, how can you not be embarrassed? Well, yes. It breeds, I mean, basic demand as a sort of, again, an entry-level demand is that any socialist project should demand the abolition of the monarchy, the abolition of the House of Lords, and its replacement with an elected chamber, and the disestablishment of the Church of England, given that the Church of England is the official state-sponsored religion here, and yet basically nobody goes to their services anymore. This isn't to say you get rid of Christianity, you just get rid of a state church with the monarch as its head. Again, founded by Henry VIII, because he would be able to get a divorce. Right. But yes, you shouldn't be calling anybody Lord to their face, except in the most bitter of mockery, to say the least. Okay. Sid says most liberals understand neither socialism nor fascism, which is true. The comment on nationalism is quite telling, because the idea that there would be a proletarian form of patriotism just hasn't broken through with them at all. It's just literally nationalism bad, state bad, no Chomsky good, but this is the cluelessness of the people concerned. Right. Okay. So we have just over 500 of you watching at the moment, which is excellent. So what I'm going to do is just do some quick announcements about future programming. So tomorrow we have an episode of the Decline and Fall show coming your way, so keep an eye out for that one. We've also got the patrons Q&A program on Patreon coming up tomorrow at around about 7 p.m. in the evening, so do keep an eye out for that one as well. I hope you've enjoyed this. I think the best way to describe it is the geopolitical update. More varied programming coming your way very soon, including the return of the Antonio Gramsci series. But until we meet again, which will be tomorrow, I will bid everybody a good day. Thanks to everybody who's watched tonight. Thanks to everybody who supports the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Couldn't do the show without you. And all it remains for me to say is solidarity and enjoy the rest of your day.
Утреннего стяг в жизни важен первый шаг.
Слышишь, реют над страною ветры яростных атак, и вновь продолжается бой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы.
Продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди.
С неба милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути.
И вновь